For a Prince of Peace, there's a whole lot of discomfort in this passage. But there's a whole lot of discomfort in our world. And so I wonder if Jesus is being descriptive of what is. I saw this video this week, and it's from the LA, as in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Unified School Board of Education. And they passed unanimously a resolution affirming, celebrating, and taking pride in the LGBTQ plus students, parents, and staff in the LAUSD community. Now, this school district is evidently the second largest in the entire nation. And I would love to think that they were doing this to be proactive and progressive. In the name of Pride Month, they're going to do this. But sadly, this was in response to hate that they had received. And it all started when the school board president, a woman by the name of Jackie Goldberg, read a book to some elementary students about families. And there is one line in the entire children's book that acknowledges that there are lesbian and gay parents in the world. It says something like, some families have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. That's the line. Almost a drop in if you're me. Like, come on, a little more, please. But no, just the awareness and the drop-in of that line, evidently things started to spiral out of control. There were protests at the school. Someone burned a gay pride flag, and it was just chaos for 3 or 4 days, and the board decided to take a stand. And Goldberg gave a speech at the board meeting, and the cameras were rolling, and she was passionate. She was fierce. And at some point, she started yelling at people. And she was vulnerable. She did not back down on her invitation and demand for everyone not to get along, but to begin respecting each other and to stop spreading fear. She names the yelling and the screaming and the protesting, and then asks, what do you think that did to them? To the gay students, the gay teachers, the gay custodians, the gay workers in this city, what do you think that did to them? It made them afraid. And then she screams, how dare you make them afraid because you are? Yeah. And then she kind of pulls herself together a little bit and says other beautiful things, but she also says, you don't have to love me. You don't have to like me. You can think I'm the devil incarnate. But you treat me like a decent human being because that's how I treat you, even though you don't believe I have the right to exist. Because you see, she is a queer person too. And then it got even better for me because this older lesbian Jewish woman quotes Jesus. And then she quotes the golden rule, and she says, I think we all need to live up to that. And that's when I imagine her dropping the mic and walking away. Jesus is telling an inconvenient truth. I don't think he's looking for conflict per se because he enjoys that. I think conflict finds him because there is so much that is out of sync and out of step with God's kingdom in the world. Jesus is preaching a message of radical love, and the world is not built to receive him. Not then, perhaps not today. Because the world typically revolves around power and privilege. To speak his truth, to speak God's truth in love is to invite conflict. And friends, our world may feel like it's falling apart, like conflict is everywhere. And we have this thing where Jesus says, bring in the sword. Well, I would offer to you that our world does feel a little bit, in many ways, like it is falling apart. So let's just stick with that for a second. Because maybe this shifting, while uncomfortable, is not all that bad. Things I didn't think I was going to say. Because while it is difficult and it is scary sometimes, and it is, and I can say that, it is scary sometimes, I think that what we are experiencing right now is also kind of amazing if you step back and look at why we're here. Because peace has not come, not yet. And yet the assumptions and traditions of the old world are shifting and making ways for what is to come. And I welcome the new. I welcome a society that cannot just preach about making a world a better place, but is actually doing things to shift and change, to create the new beloved community. We're in the midst of a backlash to progress. Racial progress. We had our first Black president, and now we have an openly racist and misogynistic political movement. Openly. It was there before, but now it's different. Black Lives Matter is leading us towards real conversation on how to be anti-racist and what we can do as a society to begin to heal our racist systems. And I wouldn't go back to the systemic violence happening right under our noses in mainstream white society, those with privilege and power, not talking about it, and certainly not doing anything to shift that power. A movement not too long ago pushed for LGBTQ+ rights and won marriage equality. And now in some places, the polls are showing less acceptance for LGBTQ+ people, and trans folk are being harassed at alarming rates. But I wouldn't go back to not being able to be married, and you can't put me back in that closet. And there are more rights that I need. More room for me and for others in the LGBTQ community. And these rights are worth fighting for, and so we struggle on. The Me Too movement called out terrible violence of sexism. And then we lost critical health care for women. But I have hope in a world with less violence, and healthcare based in human dignity and actual equality. And I believe we can get there, and there are people trying to lead us there. And I wouldn't go back to skirt chasing in the office or women suffering in silence. Would you? Here's the women going, No, and so we wade through the chaos and the uncomfortableness, and we push for what we know we need and what we deserve. Mental health has long been a concern, and we need to be able to discuss it, and we need more resources. And the pandemic finally allowed us to talk a little bit more openly about mental health without quite so much stigma, without quite so much shame. And now that people are trying to actually find the help that they need, the system that was already taxed is completely overwhelmed. 6 years ago, if you had come to me and said, I need help, I would make a couple of phone calls, I would find 3 or 4 therapists, and I could say, here are some resources. I've been sending out notes to people I know and saying, can you give me a recommendation? And sometimes the response from therapists is just silence. And it happened again this week, and someone came back to me and said, call so-and-so, tell her I sent you. It took one therapist to get the other therapist's attention so this person could get into the door. We have a lot of work to do. But I wouldn't go back to the stigma or the shame or the inability to get the help we need or to ask and recognize what we need for our mental well-being. We are living through a difficult time. And yet the difficulties seem to be because we are holding up God's light to our culture, and the ugliness of our system is seen, and it is no longer acceptable. Thanks be to God. We are taking a sword to the way the things were, and swords rip and tear, and it's hard to put them back together. And I, for one, don't want to go backwards, even though this tearing apart feels awful sometimes. Within myself, within my family, within our world and our community, it's not easy. It is uncomfortable, and it asks me and us to change and to grow and to raise our voices and to get even more uncomfortable. Just when we thought we had been okay with taking that first step, there's another one. And yet, in the midst of all of that, in the midst of my own fear and all of the negative verses swirling and amplified by the media, in the midst of all of this, there is another voice. There is that voice of God urging us forward. Love all of the little sparrows, because God knows us and God loves us all. Our systems love power and money, and fear keeps those systems strong. But God loves us all. And sometimes we sparrows have to stick together and get uncomfortable together. And I pray that we might get uncomfortable and love and be loving sparrows and a loving home for all who hear that other voice alongside us. May it be so.